a financial viability of being in those spaces. But I think the most important thing as a total non-finance guy, I'm not Michael Pachter, I don't really know any of this stuff, I just go with my gut a lot of times, but for me what seems to make sense, just from my perspective, is, you know, intentionally try to make a hit, you know, and be humble about maybe you're not the best guy or girl or woman or man on the team to judge what a hit is. A lot of games get made and you have an art director that's in love with so much geeky stuff, including myself, I'm a total geek, that they don't really stop to think, okay, is this going to travel beyond that small pool to really have a chance to go outside of that? And so I'm a big believer in hits. I love mainstream entertainment. And so for me, I can tell you what I'm doing, and that's continuing to try to budget my budgets that we make games on with the audience that we can make in mind. The game I was just telling you about that I had a thought about that I want to make next, I don't want to make it if we can't budget it to be under $2.5–3 million, because it's not like the game we're making now, or God of War, that we know we have a bigger audience pool. So that's a terrible answer to your question. It's rambling. It's not really that insightful. I really don't know. I'm just fucking grateful to be working.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, hi. I'm wondering what's worked for you personally and what hasn't with regards to inspiring the teams that you've worked with, you know, the creative vision, the dream for a game. And how much of that vision do you trust to your team, and how much of it is kind of filtered down through your leads, etc.?
You know, it is really hard. It is really, for me, it has been really, really hard to communicate the vision, to sell the vision. Every game I've ever worked on, there is, even after we've had some success, there is, doubt that members of your team will express about you and your vision, especially at that point when you're making a game where everything's not coming together yet. And you've always got people on the team who, you know, have somebody's ear, and they'll say, well, this is what we should be doing. And they'll try to build that momentum, whether it's intentional or not. And you're having to fight against that. You're having to fight against people not understanding what you want. And then on top of that, I have to fight against the fact that I love games as a medium, but I don't love games that are out there. It's like every year there'll be 1 or 2 games or 3 games that I fall in love with and think are amazing. And then the rest of the games I'll appreciate aspects of, but I'll be like, yeah, that's not really what I'm into, you know. And so, for example, like Modern Warfare, I've loved the Spec Ops aspect of Modern Warfare 2. The straight-up multiplayer I don't like, and it's not like only an idiot would tell you it's not well made. But I just don't like the rhythm of most first-person shooters where you take 3 or 4 steps and you get killed because your hit points, your health are so low. I like being alive long enough, like in a fighting game, to form a relationship with my adversary. Well, you try to sell that to a bunch of people on a team that are hardcore FPS players, and a lot of times they don't appreciate you're coming from a different perspective that might be representing a part of the market that isn't being served. All they see is, oh, well, you just don't fucking like FPSs and you shouldn't be leading this game, you know. And so it's really hard. I mean, it's just a hard thing. So in terms of how do you sell that vision, you got to be as nice as you can, and you got to, even though I don't think I'm humble, like, I mean, I have a good sense of self-esteem. I'm a big fan of my ideas. I'm a big believer, and you need to be. But you need to find a way to pitch them in a way. You know, I read, you guys know who Joel Silver is. He's a movie producer, did a lot of the great movies in the 80s. He would always kind of open up a criticism or a question with kind of this little phrase of like, well, I don't really know much about it, but, and even though that's clearly a tactic, a political tactic, there's value to it because you can get into it, it's a conversation starter. But, so I think you have to try a lot of those tricks, but I think end of the day, you got to be willing to fail, and you got to be willing to be tenacious like a junkyard dog and not really care if you're popular. I mean, I was probably the least popular guy on the God of War team, and it wasn't fun. But I held to my vision, and I'm grateful that I did. So it's just, the answer is it's really hard, and there's no magic way to do it. You just got to fight.
Hi.
Hey.
Hi. I often look in electronic boutique, etc. once a week, so and I noticed the genres that we have on our shelves are quite narrow, really, when you consider how many there are. Who is driving the current oversupply of war, car, death, destruction, and red pixels? Is it the developers, the publishers, because their sequels are somehow successful, consumers, or is it just testosterone all round?
No, it's the consumers. I mean, it's the consumers and it's the medium. The reality is, you know, I do not get behind and I do not support this idea that publishers are these kind of oafish, stupid, oh, let's just do what sells. I mean, a lot of them are. But almost every big publisher has somewhere in their lineup to try some different things, from Ubisoft to EA to Sony to Microsoft, certainly to Nintendo. And so I don't think it's, I'm not saying you're doing this, but I don't think the general kind of, you know, bashing that a lot of publishers and developers get where they're not trying new things. I don't think that's accurate or fair. But all that said, though, look, I mean, it is a business, and you know, what does tend to sell? And I don't even know if this is a criticism of human nature, like, oh, we're violent, although, you know, many would argue we are. But I think it's more about fantasy fulfillment and selling that fantasy, and what, you know, what this controller can really speak to. And it's hard to make, you know, Sense and Sensibility with motion captured Emma Thompson and figuring out how to deal with that. With these, you know, there's only so much you can really do right now with how you can interact with the game. And so I think that drives it. But I also think it's what consumers want. They walk into a store, they want a game to fulfill their fantasies. And a lot of people's fantasies who play video games are, they want to be powerful, whether that's on the football field, or they want to be a star, whether that's on something like SingStar or an actual soccer game, or they want to unleash some rage, and whether that's on Modern Warfare. And so, you know, one of the things I hear all the time is people saying they like to use the industry as a reason that we don't have these deeper, more meaningful games. And if it was just that we could get rid of these kind of, you know, knuckle-dragging publishers that are getting in the way of our art, we could really do something special. And I just believe that. I think we struggling to figure out how it can be more than just interactive sports. And you know, Modern Warfare is a sport, football is a sport, God of War is a sport. It's you know, we can talk all we want about stories and emotion, but most games don't really deliver on that. And I think that's really where more of it comes from than anything else. But I know a lot of people would disagree with me on that, but that's sort of, as somebody who loves stories and would love to find a way to make a story game work, I've struggled with it, and I've seen some of the most well-spoken people in the industry talk about how they want to make games about something. But when I actually ask them, okay, what do you do once you pick up the controller? Oh, I have it. I'm like, yeah, I know you have it. No one has. So.
Hi there. As someone who's been involved in edgy storytelling, what are your thoughts on the no Russian scene in Modern Warfare 2? And did you personally yourself gun down the innocence while you played that game?
My thoughts on it. Well, unfortunately, you know, it got so much hype that by the time I got to the game, I kind of knew what was coming. So I don't know how I would have responded if I would have just experienced it, you know, without all the precursor, the preamble. But, you know, the most effective part of that to me, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, so cover your ears if you care about this kind of stuff, was at the very end, when I think I'm going to get into the ambulance and he shoots me in the head. And that was the moment where I kind of jolted, like, oh, I didn't see that coming. Everything else, I mean, you know, I don't buy it, I guess. It's like, you know, one of the, you know, it's kind of like when they had that scene in Half-Life 2 where you're kind of in that room with the scientist and Alex, and having a conversation, kind of like, well, can I fuck with them? What if I knock something over, will they respond? I don't think emotional storytelling in video games is as simple as making the stuff that moves us in movies and turning it interactive. Because I think by the very nature of making something interactive, it doesn't carry the kind of meaning that a movie does, or a linear story where you're invested in a different way. And so I just kind of looked at it as a playground.